I was seated at table 27, in the very back of the room next to the doors for the kitchen staff. But nobody in that ballroom knew I was the actual owner of the hotel. I still remember the exact moment the laughter stopped. 1 second, crystal glasses were clinking beneath the golden chandeliers of the grand ballroom, and my family was enjoying the subtle humiliation they had arranged for me. The next second, every face turned pale as the general manager rushed past the bride and groom and addressed me with a level of respect none of them expected to hear. "Ms. Hartley, I am so sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice carrying through the sudden lull. "We have a critical situation at the front desk with your sister's VIP guests. It requires the owner's immediate approval to override room allocations." The room went completely silent. My mother nearly dropped her champagne glass. My sister's smile disappeared. And my father looked at me as though he were seeing me for the very first time. Because, after 32 years of treating me like a disappointment, they were finally about to discover who I really was. But before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. And if you've ever been treated like the black sheep of your family, make sure to like and subscribe, because this story might remind you that the people who underestimate you are often the ones who know you the least. My name is Victoria Hartley, and for most of my life, I existed in the shadow of my younger sister, Charlotte. To the outside world, we appeared to be the perfect daughters of a successful Boston family. My father, Richard Hartley, owned a respected investment firm. My mother, Diane, chaired several charity boards and spent her days maintaining an immaculate social facade. And Charlotte was their masterpiece. Beautiful, charming, effortlessly adored. If Charlotte painted a mediocre watercolor, my parents treated it like a museum piece. If I earned the highest grades in my class, they nodded politely and asked if I could help Charlotte study for her exams. By the time I turned 12, I had learned that in the Hartley family, love was distributed according to preference. And I was not the preferred child. The older I became, the more invisible I seemed to my family. At first, that realization hurt. Then it motivated me. Eventually, it became my greatest advantage. Because while my parents were busy polishing Charlotte into Boston society's perfect princess, nobody paid attention to what I was doing. Nobody noticed my scholarships, my business classes, or the nights I spent studying hotel management, finance, and real estate operations, while everyone else assumed I was simply working another ordinary, dead-end job. The truth was far more complicated. At 22, immediately after graduating from university, I accepted a position as a junior operations coordinator at a struggling hotel in Providence. The salary was terrible, and the hours were worse. "A hotel?" my father had asked during Sunday dinner, looking genuinely disappointed. "You spent 4 years earning a business degree to pass out room keys?" "I thought she was going into a respectable bank," my mother sighed. Charlotte just smiled softly into her wineglass. That was the moment I stopped trying to explain myself. Successful people don't waste energy convincing others to believe in them. They simply keep working until success speaks for itself. For the next 8 years, I lived a life my family knew nothing about. I learned every aspect of the hospitality industry. By 26, I had become a regional operations director. By 28, I was consulting for major investors purchasing distressed properties throughout New England. By 30, I had accumulated enough capital and industry relationships to form Apex Hospitality Group alongside 3 quiet investors. I intentionally chose a neutral name, Apex, and kept my name off the front-facing press releases so my father, with his deep connections in investment circles, wouldn't catch wind of what I was building before I was ready. Our first property was outdated and barely profitable, but we transformed it within 18 months. The profits funded a second acquisition, then a third. Within 4 years, Apex Hospitality Group controlled 7 luxury properties across the Northeast. And nobody in my family knew. Not because I hid it, but because they never cared to ask. Every family gathering followed the same script. Charlotte discussed her social calendar, and when anyone asked about me, it was always the same question. "Still working at that hotel?" I always answered, "Yes." Technically, I wasn't lying. Around that same time, I met Daniel Carter. He was a brilliant architect and the co-founder of a highly respected, quiet European design firm. He was private, understated, and completely detached from the shallow social climbing of the Boston elite. He asked questions that mattered. He wanted to know my dreams, not my net worth. When he proposed beside the ocean in Cape Cod during a stormy October evening, I said yes immediately. We decided to keep our engagement private initially. I wasn't interested in turning my relationship into another competition for my family's approval. 6 months later, Charlotte announced her engagement to Andrew Whitmore, the son of a wealthy real estate developer. The reaction from my parents was immediate celebration. One evening, while listening to my mother discuss flower arrangements, I casually mentioned that Daniel and I were engaged as well. The response contained less enthusiasm than most people show when hearing about a neighbor's new dog. "Oh, that's nice," my mother said, before turning right back to Charlotte to discuss the catering. Indifference required less effort than open criticism, but it hurt much more. 3 months later, Charlotte selected the venue for her wedding, the Grand Ashford Hotel. It was the crown jewel of luxury hospitality in Boston, a historic property hosting politicians and celebrities. It was also the hotel my company had quietly purchased 18 months earlier. When my assistant informed me that Charlotte Hartley had booked the grand ballroom, I stared at the reservation and laughed. Life possesses a sense of irony so perfect that no writer would dare invent it. My sister had chosen my hotel. My family would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars celebrating her wedding inside a building they didn't realize belonged to me. I considered revealing the truth right then, but decided against it. I wanted to see how they treated me when they believed I had absolutely nothing to offer them. The answer arrived on the wedding day in the form of Table 27. The morning of Charlotte's wedding arrived bright and warm. I arrived at the venue alone, driving my black Mercedes. At the valet entrance, the staff recognized me immediately. A concierge's eyes went wide, but I gave him a subtle warning glance. Not yet. I walked inside, where the ballroom looked magnificent. My mother was walking around, barking orders at the staff, as if she owned the place. My father was entertaining business partners, and Charlotte floated between guests in a designer gown. My mother noticed me first. "Victoria, you're alone? Where is your architect?" "Daniel will arrive later," I said. Her expression tightened. "Well, try not to make it obvious. I'm sorry, but we had a last-minute rush of your father's most important investment partners, so we had to tighten the seating arrangement. Your name is at the end of the list." I checked the chart. Table 27. It wasn't an open screaming match. My parents were too concerned with appearances to cause a scene in front of Boston high society. They disguised it as an organizational necessity, but the message was loud and clear. They had placed me behind a decorative partition, right next to the vendor and catering coordination table. Out of sight, so the single, underachieving daughter wouldn't ruin the picture-perfect image of the family. I sat down quietly at the empty table. The wedding coordinator, spotting me there, turned pale as a sheet. She rushed over, stammering, "Miss Hartley, I am so sorry, we didn't know you were sitting here. Let me move a VIP table. Let me fix this." "It's fine, Emily," I smiled reassuringly. "Don't cause a scene. Let the evening proceed." By the time dinner service began, whispers were already spreading. Several prominent local business leaders seated in the center of the room recognized me. They knew me as the CEO of Apex, and the confusion on their faces was comical as they tried to understand why a major player in New England hospitality was sitting in the vendor section. And then, the breaking point arrived. A severe logistics error occurred at the front desk. The luxury shuttle service for my father's elite international investors had been delayed by a street closure, and their premium suites weren't ready on time. My father was already in the lobby, red-faced and raising his voice at the desk staff, threatening a massive scene that would ruin his reputation in front of his peers. Michael, the hotel's general manager, knew I was in the room. Fearing the fallout, he didn't care about family dynamics. He just wanted to save the hotel's reputation. Michael marched straight into the ballroom, past the head table, and came right to table 27. "Ms. Hartley," his voice cut through the background music, "we have an emergency with the arrival of Mr. Richard Hartley's top clients. The front desk is requesting your personal authorization to upgrade them to the presidential suites immediately to resolve the conflict." My father, who had followed Michael into the room to find a manager, froze. "Michael, what are you talking about?" he demanded, looking irritated. "Why are you asking my daughter? I want to speak to the person in charge." Michael blinked, looking genuinely confused. "Richard, Miss Victoria Hartley is the person in charge. She is the founder and majority owner of Apex Hospitality Group. This hotel belongs to her. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. My mother froze. Charlotte took a step back. My father stared at me, his mind racing as he connected the dots. Apex, a multi-million-dollar network of luxury properties. The very company he had tried to pitch investment deals to earlier that year. At that exact moment, the heavy ballroom doors opened, and Daniel entered. Dressed in a flawless bespoke tuxedo, he carried himself with an effortless authority. One of my father's largest institutional investors instantly stood up from his central table, waving. Daniel? Daniel Carter? I didn't know you were connected to the Hartleys. Daniel politely shook his hand but kept walking, coming straight to my table. He took my hand and smiled. Apologies for being late, darling. Traffic by the harbor was a nightmare. Michael, go ahead and approve the presidential suites for my fiancé's family. Let's make sure the night runs smoothly. My father looked as though reality itself had betrayed him. He had spent his entire life measuring human worth through titles and net worth, and he had just realized his dismissed daughter had completely eclipsed his own firm, while her quiet architect fiancé was a key developer backed by international funds. Victoria, my father stammered, taking a step toward me. Why didn't you say anything? We could have partnered, we could have aligned our portfolios. Even now, his first instinct was the portfolio. I stood up, smoothed down my dress, and looked at him with a calm, peaceful expression. You didn't know, Dad, because you never asked. For 32 years you all looked at me, but you never actually saw me. Charlotte remained silent, looking down. My mother slowly sank into her chair. I turned to the general manager. Fix the rooms, Michael. Let the party continue. Then I looked at my sister. Congratulations on your wedding, Charlotte. Daniel and I walked toward the exit. The same people who had happily watched me sit by the kitchen doors now stood in stunned silence as we left the building. It has been a year since that night. Real life doesn't fix itself instantly, but that moment forced my family to stop. My father called a few months later, not to discuss business, but to offer a genuine, tearful apology. My mother started therapy to understand why she valued superficial status over her own children. We are rebuilding our relationship slowly, from scratch. But the greatest lesson I learned wasn't about money or revenge. It was this. The people who truly love you never need a demonstration of your success to treat you with respect. They see your worth from the very beginning. And once you understand that, no one can ever make you feel small again. Not even your own family.